All right, lesson 7.9, estimating with percent. I'm going to show you how I want you to do this. Let's talk about this. Okay, estimating with percent is huge. It's huge. Let's say this. Let's say I'm going to the store and there is a $29.99 shirt that is 20% off, okay? That is 20% off. I'm going to show you how I would do this, okay? And this is really, when you're going to estimate with percents, this is really a very good way of doing it. How many of you know how to very quickly come up with 10% of something? What is 10% of 50? Isn't it 1/10 of it? Isn't it 1/10 of it? Isn't 10% 1/10? Isn't that what 10% is? Is 1/10? Well, what's a tenth of 50? If you were to break up 50 into 10 pieces, what's each piece? 5. 1/10 is 5. So then 10% is 5. Right? What if I was to ask you what is 20% of 50? This is what you should do. Break it down to 10%. What is 10% of 50? 5. But I don't want to know 10%, I want to know 20%. So instead of it being 5, I'm going to double it to make it 20%, and double 5 is 10. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Yes. You break it down to 10%, and then you work with it from there. Let's just say this. What if I wanted to know what was 70% of 50? What you should do is find out what 10% is. What's 10% of 50 again? 5. So if 10% is 5, what is 70% going to be? 7 times 5. 35. Does that make sense? You just if you can find 10%, then you're in pretty good shape. You can almost do anything you want to with percents. You can estimate almost anything. So knowing that, let's look at this. This is using mental math. $29.99. What should I turn that to? $30, right? 30. 20% off. So if I want to know how much off it is, what should I do? What should be the first thing that I do? Find 10%. No matter what I'm going to do, I'm going to find 10%. What is 10% of 30? 3. Do you all understand that? Is there anybody here who doesn't understand that 10% of 30 is 3? You all got that. Michael, you've got that. That makes sense. Juna, that makes sense. If 10% is 3, then what is 20%? 6. So then how much off am I going to get off of this shirt? $6. If I was to ask you, well, then how much is the shirt going to be? Is the shirt $6? No, you'd take away $6 from 30. It'd be 24. Right? That's estimating. That's estimating with percents. I want you to be able to do that for me. Okay? So let's try one. You guys, let's take a little quiz just to see if you can do this. Okay, there is a $48.70 item that is 30% off. I want to know how much off it is, okay? Each one of these. Number 2, there is a $71.19 item that is 60% off. I'm asking you how much off it is, okay? Okay, let's do number 1. Let's look here. Since we're just estimating, what should I turn $48.70 into? 50. Oh my goodness gracious. That should be a 50. That was really badly written. 50. 30% off. What should I do? Please tell me you know this time. What should I do, Sladen?
See how many out of 10 it is?
Not see how many out of 10. It's called find 10%. Find 10% of that. What is 10% of 50? 5. If 10% is 5, then what is 30%? 15. So how much off is this item? $15 off. How many of you got 15 for number 1? Did you, Momo? What did you do different?
I subtracted.
Right, you subtracted it saying it was 35, right. That makes sense. The next one, number 2, 7119. What should I turn that into? 70. Okay, 70. I want to know what 60% off is. Okay, what do I do here? What do I do? Find what 10% is. What's 10% of 70? 7. If 10% is 7, then 60% is, well, this was multiplied by 6. That means this is going to be multiplied by 6, which is 42. 42. Make sense? That's how much off it is. If I was to ask you how much is the item now, you would take away 42 from 7119, and that's about how much it's going to be. Does that make sense? What about this? What happens when you get something like 15%? So I'm going to give you an item. We'll do this. We'll go $60. And I want to know what is 15% off. All of a sudden now 15%, okay? You still use 10. You still use 10. You find what is 10% of 60? 6. So 10% is 6. 15% is already the 10% you had, but now 5%. 5% is only half of what 10% is, right? So you find 10% and then you add half of what it was before. So instead of it being 6, when I add the 5%, I'm going to add 3. So then how much off is it? 9. Does that make sense? It's the 10, which is 6, and then because it's 15, half of that makes 3 more, which is 9. Okay, you guys think you have that? Try this then. Try this. I think you can do it. 38.75, and it is 25% off. I want to know how much off it is. So your watch. This is important. What do I need to do here? What do I need to find? Find 10%. What should I turn 38.75 into? 40. What is 10% of 40? Joy? 4. So 10% is 4, which means that 20% would be 8. 25%, now didn't go all the way up to 30, so it wouldn't be 12. So it's just half of what it was the first time, half of 4, which is 2. So then how much off is it? 10. How many of you got 10 for that? Is it not making sense, Jared?
Oh.
It's not making sense?
Oh, okay. I get it now. So I don't get how you got.
Listen, if 10% is 4, then 20% would be twice as much, is 8. And then 25 is a half more, right? Not a whole 4 more, but it's just half more, which instead of adding 4, you add 2. What happens when they want something like this? There's a tax. Here's an item, $20 item, and there is an 8% tax on it. 8% tax. You guys all know what tax is, right? Which means that they add money to it, right? You take the item and then you have to add tax. 8%, this is what I would do. Are you ready for this? I mean, we're just estimating, right? How long should estimating take? 2 seconds, right? It should take no time at all. 8% is actually pretty close to 10%. It really is. And so with whatever number you come up with, just subtract a little bit. Does that make sense? So what is 10% of 20? 2. So it isn't going to be $2. It might be a little less than that. So what might you say is the tax? $1.75 or something? You know what I'm talking about? $1.80, $1.60. Anywhere in there would be fine with me because I just want it to happen quick. You should just know that it's going to be a little bit less than $2. Does that make sense? That's what I do. If I'm going to go to the store and I want to figure out how much the tax is going to be, I'm just using 10% roughly and then taking a little bit off. That's what I do. Make sense? Try one. Ooh, a tough one. $115.99 item, and there is a 6% tax. Ooh, I want to see how you handle this. Okay, so 6%. What did most of you do? Let's take a look. First of all, 115. 120. I think that's probably good. 120 bucks. No matter what are you going to do? No matter what you're going to find, 10%. What is 10% of 120? 12. So, if 10% is 12, I would jump to 5 right now. What is 5%? 6. Is it a little bit more than that or a little less than that?
No more.
A little bit more than that. Does that make sense? So if 10% is 12, 5% is 6, it's a little bit more than that. I might say 7. Does that make sense? The tax would be about $7. That's what I would do. How many of you have somewhere between like $6 and $8? That's what your answer should be. Somewhere between 6 and 8. That would be too much. That would be too much. Make sense? Okay. There's really, that's really it. If you can do those things right there, then you can do this assignment. I am pretty loose when it comes to estimating. You know that. So honestly, it should not take you very long because I don't think it shouldn't. You don't make it take very long. You're estimating. Make numbers nice and round, and just estimate. Okay. Let me give you your homework. Wow, you guys get it really early today. Crazy, huh? Okay, page 357 through 18 even, and 30 to 36 even.